everyone, I'm Kevin, otherwise known as Forum BX257, here to bring you another 1980s and 90s G.I. Joe tour review. But today I'm going to be continuing on with my Air Commandos review, this time taking a look at the Cobra Air Commandos from 1991 and 1992. Now, if you haven't seen my previous video, which covered the G.I. Joe releases for the Air Commandos, please check out that video first, as I might skip over some content which would be relevant to the Air Commandos here. And here we have all three Air Commandos released for the Cobra side. We have the 1991 Skycreeper, 1991 Night Vulture, and 1992 Air Devil. Now, I apologize in advance if I accidentally call the Skycreeper a Night Creeper or a Night Vulture a Night Viper. I'll probably catch this in editing, but I'm only human. Now, none of the Cobra Air Commandos make any comic book appearances, at least not in the old Marvel comic run of G.I. Joe. Skycreeper here makes his first animated appearance in the Deke animated television episode titled El Dorado, City of Gold. And Night Vulture makes his appearance later on in the episode titled Long Live Rock and Roll Part 1. The Air Devil does not make any cartoon appearances, unfortunately. Interestingly enough, the Deke animated series actually treated Skycreeper here, who is an individual and supposed to be the leader of the Air Commandos, as a generic soldier, so you would actually see several of him. First, let's take a look at Skycreeper. Just move his glider out of the way. And we'll take a look at his accessory first. Now, no matter what negative things I might say about Skycreeper, you have to admit that his weapon kind of redeems him, because this is a perfect representation, in my mind, of a Walther P-38 Uncle Carbine. Of course, this is missing a few things like the extended mag and the shoulder stock. As a matter of fact, I don't think the Megatron version had the extended mag either. But this is close enough. It's a shame that it's done in blue, but it actually matches the figure, so I guess I can forgive that. If you ignore Skycreeper's garish color scheme just for a moment, you can see that he does have some pretty practical elements to his uniform, starting off with his helmet, which is very swoopy and aerodynamic, more like a racing bicyclist helmet. Still, it's very practical for wind resistance. He also has these kind of wraparound goggles going right over his nose in one piece. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be part of the helmet or a separate piece, but again, it looks very protective. There's a nice little left-hand draw cross chest holster there. And on the bottom, we have leg armor. Now, I know I complained about the leg armor on Cloudburst in the previous video, but I think that this is way more practical, because it's on the front of his legs and not on the side like Cloudburst's. Again, you're looking at a character who is, kind of going to be possibly landing or crashing like this. So, of course, some armor on the front of his legs makes a bit more sense. But, yeah, okay, going with the really bad color scheme, this bright yellow, and, well, I mean, the blue doesn't really all matter so much. He is a Skyborn figure, so blue is okay, and it matches the great Walther P-38 pistol that he comes with. But yeah, I kind of wish they went with something other than yellow. White, or maybe just going off with the black, which is what the rest of his pants and boots are. If there's one thing I do have to admit, is that there is a lot of attention to detail where there is the detail, because they went and painted on the straps. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot of work, but honestly, for a figure that you're almost always going to be displaying, front ways like this, having the painted straps back here means that they didn't pinch the pennies when it came to actually giving this guy the paint job. As a matter of fact, the straps themselves have a nice little woven pattern, making them more like modern nylon straps. Of course, there's the ones across his butt here, which actually intersects the copyright information stamped on his butt. So they actually went and put the copyright information vertically instead of horizontally. Skycreeper's glider has a very Halloween-y color scheme with the black and purple, orange, And of course that zombie green, which is the same green which all of the Cobra gliders will actually use. It's actually part of the frame. And of course the construction for the 1991 gliders are all the same G.I. Joe or Cobra. They all have the same wingspan, at least one type of gun. Of course the guns were unique to Cobras, but at least they had a gun on there which could swivel around. And of course this the circular ring, which is a type of stabilizer for the glider. And here is Skycreeper attached to his glider. Now I do have to say that I don't like this color combination at all. Because while the color combination for the actual glider itself is fine, and while despite how loud Skycreeper's actual color scheme is, I wouldn't say that it's clashing in any way, but then you put them together and it looks like that's a figure from another glider, rather than this actually being the color combination that Hasbro want to go with. And you would think that as the leader of the Cobra side, he would have a much more unifying color scheme. And now taking a look at the Night Vulture, just getting his glider out of the way, and taking a look at his accessory first. Night Vulture's accessory is a bow with a machine gun attached to it. Very interesting. You can see the three bows right here, as well as the machine gun on the bottom, with the magazine sticking out sideways. I really like this combination, but one thing is very strange about it, and that is the grip. The grip looks, well, kind of unfinished when you look at it. I mean, it fits in the figure's hand very well, and very sturdily. I mean, it's not falling out anytime soon, but honestly, you would think that this would have like some type of texture. I have to admit, the Night Vulture is my favorite out of all the Cobra Air Commando uniforms. I know a lot of people really love the Daredevil, which I'll get to in just a moment, but I love the sort of ninja-esque look of the Night Vulture. As a matter of fact, the crossbow actually goes a long way with the sort of ninja theme that he has. Even though it doesn't say anything about him being a ninja in his file card, he is just a night-born covert infiltration glider pilot, really. Taking a look at his head, which is a little bit difficult because it's black plastic, and this is not really coming out on camera as well as I really would like to. But you can see it has some knotting detail on the back of his head, so this whole thing is just sort of a one-piece black cloth wrapped around his head and knotted at the back with the goggles over the top of that. He does have like a mouth and a nose poking out through that cloth though, but you can see even there they have like slight wrinkles over his nose and mouth, so that is like a tight little cloth over his face. It's rather impressive to me because just the overall design is really cool, and when you think about the G.I. Joe Commando Snake Eyes released in the same year, that version is not really well received simply because of his bright colors and his oversized goggles. And you think that this was made by the same sculpting team, and that this guy looks more like a really cool version of Snake Eyes than the actual Snake Eyes does. Now I know some people really don't like the bright pops of orange, but it's not like it's all over his body. It's just like, you know, just some portions, just equipment that he has on him. He is a pilot after all, so I mean the overall dark purple and black color scheme is more than enough for me to sort of forgive this and think that this is just like high visibility pilot equipment, really. He even has what looks like nunchucks strapped to his legs here. I swear this guy must have been a ninja at some point in his design stage, and then they just went, well, let's just use him as a glider pilot for now. Not only is the Night Vulture my favorite of the Cobra Air Commandos, his glider color scheme is as well, with the black and the blue separated by this tiny outline of orange. That's the way you do a pop of color, not some weird mechanical design on an otherwise canvas glider. As a matter of fact, it almost kind of gives you a 3D effect where you're kind of looking at maybe in between trees, like the blue of night you're looking at the in-between shadows of trees or something like that. I'm not really sure what they were going for, but it's certainly distinctive and very cool. And yet on the other side, where the pilot would sit, you have these almost Scooby-Doo-like eyes poking out here. I guess this is supposed to be like some type of crazy monster flying at you at night. And here's the Night Vulture attached to his glider. And I do have to say that even though the colors aren't the same, at least it matches. It matches way better than Skycreeper's does. I'd say that the only thing which doesn't go along is the green, but unfortunately the green was standard with all of the Cobra gliders. One very interesting thing, however, is though, if you look at Skycreeper's glider, his glider is primarily purple and orange, the same colors as the Night Vulture. You would think that they would swap these two around, but honestly, I don't think the yellow and blue would go any better with the black and blue of Night Vulture's glider. However, there is one very odd thing about that on top of all of this, and that is that unlike most vehicles in the G.I. Joe line, the gliders actually have the item number. And that is the 4-digit number starting with a 6. 6813 for the Night Vulture. And 6814 for Skycreeper. However, if you look at the packages, those item numbers are actually reversed. So it almost looks like maybe these should have been the other way around. And here's the Night Vulture on Skycreeper's glider. And here's Skycreeper on the Night Vulture's glider. Now that I come to think of it, it doesn't look half bad this way. What do you think? Were they swapped as the item numbers would suggest? Or was this the plan all along and this printing on here is actually a typo? And last but not least, we have the Air Devil. Let's just get his glider out of the way and take a look at his two accessories, one which I will not remove from the figure. The Air Devil's main weapon is what the file card, not the contents list on the card, but the actual file card itself calls an aerial assault hand rifle. Well, this is clearly some type of fantasy weapon. It's not based on a real-world military rifle. His other accessory is the full protection shatterproof deflector face mask, which is attached to his head. His head having these little nubs on the side here, which I don't really want to take the face mask off because those could crack off. I have heard that this thing is a fairly sturdy figure, but honestly, I don't really want to take that risk because this is a fairly difficult figure to get a hold of. As you can see, you can just sort of flip this thing up. It looks almost like a welding mask, which is very strange. And I'm not particularly fond of it because the only way it goes straight down onto his face is by stopping on his nose. So eventually you do that enough times and the paint on his nose is going to rub right off. And like I said in my previous video on Air Commandos, the 1992 figures, like all of them throughout the basic and sublines, all of their file cards began to have itemized lists of their accessories as well as some details explained as to what they are on the figures themselves. With an overall color scheme of red and black with little pops of silver for his armament on his chest here, I can see why a lot of collectors really love the Air Devil. Of course, Air Devil being a aerial acrobatic glider pilot is kind of a pun on the word daredevil. Starting off with his face sculpt, I don't know why, but his face sculpt always reminds me of Robert Picardo. He has nice padding all up and down his bodysuit, but there are at least two details that I want to point out. First of all is his gloves. It's very strange because his gloves seem to have a lip right around where his wrists are, and it looks like that's where it should have ended, but then they just sort of continue up. And this isn't just a case where they were just lazy and painted the whole arm black. Like, clearly there is a cutoff right here, so this is like a glove covering up like a longer glove. And according to the file card, they're called sized to fit Aredevil grabber gloves. That's pretty fancy. And one detail that I'm really hoping comes out is his belt buckle, which has two shapes on it. On the left, it looks like a little pitchfork, and on the right, it looks like a little devil tail. But according to the file card, official Order of the Aredevils combat belt buckle. And this is the Aredevil's glider. It really goes well with the figure. The simple black and red of the figure goes well with the mostly black and red here. And despite the fact that we have this sort of incongruous green, which is, again, standard with all of the Cobra gliders, they've actually gone and put this scale detail right in the middle, which really goes well with it all. Despite how busy this all looks, there are some really nice touches. The sort of scaliness in the middle really reminds me of something the Python Patrol would use. And it's very interesting that they've gone with the whole devil theme again, with the Cobra logo being modified with a devil's tail on little, hard to see devil horns on the tips of this snake head. My particular glider is not in the best of condition, with parts just wanting to curl up and fold wherever they want to. I have heard that if you dunk this into some really hot water and just sort of smooth it out with maybe like a heavy book or something like that on top of it, it will smooth out. I haven't tried it yet myself, but it may be something to do in the future. And here is the Aredevil attached to his glider. You can see it really does blend in very well, but he still stands out. So just who does the Cobra Air Commandos take over for on their Cobra side? Well, it could only be the 1983 Viper pilot from the Viper glider. Probably yet another reason why I like the Night Viper's glider is because of how similar it is to the original 1983 Viper glider. We'll take a look at that, and you can see perfectly just what the scale of these two gliders were, separated by over 7 years. And despite the color scheme, black and blue, being matched here, we also have the red Cobra symbols right on the edges of the frames here, just like the original was. And while I've already talked about how brittle the foam of the original 1983 version of the glider is, as opposed to the plastic, flexible plastic, of the new version, I haven't really talked about how this thing actually attaches a figure to it. And as you can see, this thing had a back peg, which was actually kind of smooth and didn't really connect to the back very well. So they actually added like a little rubber band. My original has, well, finally given up after years of being in my possession. This is the original black elastic band which came with the vehicle back from 1983. And of course, the new version improves on that greatly by having a proper waist clip and some foot pegs on top of that. Unnecessary foot pegs, but welcome nonetheless. Now, just as I mentioned on my G.I. Joe Air Commando glider review, this isn't necessarily how you would always get the top guns on your gliders. Now, these were separate pieces from the card that you had to attach onto the glider, and once they were on there, they were permanently attached. However, 99% of them had this arrangement where you had the double one on the Skycreeper and the single ones on the Night Vulture and Aredevil, but they could be swapped around. You could find one with the 1% factory error. As a matter of fact, my Aredevil gun is so floppy and kind of loose here that it might just come out fairly easily, and I might be able to swap it out with this extra one, which happens to be a double cannon. As for the cannons themselves, they're fairly well detailed, and of course they spin around. Now, one thing which I didn't do with my gliders in my previous Air Commandos review was actually fly them. According to the card, these things could fly up to 40 feet, which is pretty impressive, to be perfectly honest. Now, there is one really kind of annoying thing about these things, is that they don't have proper instructions, not the way you would find instructions on any other G.I. Joe vehicle. Instead, on the back of these cards, that's where they decided to print the instructions. So if you didn't cut this out of the actual card, or if you just removed the glider rather sloppily from the card, you could just rip this entire thing so it wouldn't be readable, or you might just accidentally throw this out because, well, it's a card and you would think that this thing would come with blueprints or instructions or something like that. But here is officially the way you're supposed to assemble this thing and fly it. So I'm just going to take my Skycreeper glider here, make sure I'm pinching this portion right underneath where the foot pegs are to hold on to it so I can throw it like that. And I'm just going to take this beat up parts bin Skycreeper just so that I'm not actually crashing my good mint version into the ground when I test this thing out. If you're looking for the 3 Cobra Air Commandos on the aftermarket, I do have to warn you that they have gone up fairly recently and fairly sharply up in value. So it would be fairly hard to find these guys complete with all their parts and for a reasonable price nowadays. Unfortunately, you are looking at some condition issues. Of course, you're landing this guy on his belly, so he gets scraped up fairly easily. Especially his really large helmet that seems really a hot spot for being scraped up. Of course, finding him with his gun is fairly hard. The Night Vulture is a really nice army builder. Lots of people in the past used to just grab this guy up, especially when you combine him with a really cool glider color scheme. Again, you know, the orange is not very well applied sometimes, and of course with a dark color underneath, once you scrape it up, it looks really bad. Of course, again, it's really hard to find him with his bow machine gun thing. Of course, this thing is also fairly skinny and fairly prone to being stressed and cracked. So you might have to watch out and make sure it has the strings actually on there. And finally, there is the Air Devil, which is probably the most popular of the Cobra Air Commandos. So a lot of people really love army building this guy. Of course, his gun as well as his visor are really hard pieces to find with the figure. So if you find them or if you want them, make sure you're tracking down the actual accessories for the figures first. As I mentioned in my previous review, there was like a Canadian mail-away sort of overstock for the figures themselves, but not for the accessories. So the figures themselves, just by themselves, might be a little bit easier to find than ones with the accessories. despite the garish colors, just as I mentioned on my G.I. Joe Well, that's all the time I have right now. Please check out my Facebook page for more information and behind-the-scenes photos for these reviews. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for next time to see another 1980s G.I. Joe toy review. See you then.